Hey, George.
Hi, Kristin.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Good, 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 good. I am here and I am ready. Join us.
I'm not understanding why it's not allowing me to make you the host. Let me see.
Okay. And I'm going to start my video.
I'm gonna mute myself one moment. Cool, I figured it out. I'll be able to switch it over here in a moment.
Okay. Can you hear me? And it says I cannot start video. Okay, wait a minute. Maybe now I can. Okay, this should do it. Except it didn't.
Okay.
There I am. It says I'm the host now.
So if you go to the bottom, to your controls, should where it says mute, start, start video, does it allow you to?
Oh, there I am. There, yay! Thank you, George.
Oh, technology.
I'm telling you what, one of these days I'm going to get it.
We all are. We all
and
are.
then it will change, right? Then it will change.
That's the joy of it. As soon as you've instituted a system, it automatically is out of date.
Out of date. That's exactly right. It's out of date. You're right.
All right. For jumping in. It's about 6:28. We'll get started here in just a couple minutes. I'll let a few more people come on the Zoom tonight. We thank you again for joining us for another installment of Broadway Peace Talks. And tonight's conversation is about Tootsie, which is showing at the Peace Center from January 4th through the 9th. So if you haven't purchased tickets yet, this is an awesome time, great week to do so. Things are quiet around our office, so we'll be more than happy to take your call down to the box office. And if you are a subscriber and have already purchased tickets, we thank you in advance for doing so. And you all are in for a treat, and we're really excited about hosting Tootsie and it being an amazing show in our season this year. So lots of things happening here as we end 2021, and certainly 2022 is full down at the Peace Center in terms of the 7 of the 9 Broadway shows in our season announced being in the second half of the year. So it'll be a busy season once Tootsie passes, but we're excited about it next week from January 4th through the 9th. And Kristin, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to you for the evening. Thank you so much for joining us as always, and we greatly appreciate your commitment to the Peace Center in this way.
Oh, George, thank you. It is such an honor to be a part of the Peace Center team. So thank you for having me. Thank you to all of you who are joining us tonight to talk about Tootsie. You know, it's not often that I will start these with my own endorsement of a show, but I had the opportunity to see Tootsie during its New York run in the summer of 2019. And I have to tell you, if you are in the mood to laugh and to laugh really, really hard and really, really long, then Tootsie is the show for you. It is absolutely hilarious, but there's a heart and soul to it too. We're going to talk about all of it. We're going to talk first about the film that inspired the show, then we'll talk about the show itself, and then we've got some really great interviews with a couple of the creators and a member of the company. So I'm excited for you to join us tonight to talk about Tootsie. Now I'm going to start my PowerPoint here so that you can see what I am seeing. And also, let me just say, I know many of you who join us for these talks are Broadway connoisseurs and you follow it regularly. So if you follow Broadway regularly, then you are no stranger to the fact that a major trend in the development of Broadway musicals, Broadway shows in general, but specifically musicals, is the development of a film to a musical. And this has, and throughout history, we would often see a really popular musical become a really popular film, but now we're seeing popular films becoming musicals. There's a number of reasons for that I'm not going to go into tonight. We've alluded to them in some previous Peace Talks. I'm not going to dig into that too deeply tonight. Suffice it to say, though, that it is a trend. It's represented on Broadway, most recently with shows like Beetlejuice. The 1988 film that starred Michael Keaton became a 2019 musical. Then Moulin Rouge, the 2001 film, became a 2019 musical that's still running today. And Mrs. Doubtfire, a 1993 film in which Robin Williams played everybody's favorite nanny, became a musical that opened not too long ago, actually just earlier this month on Broadway after a number of fits and starts related to the pandemic. So those are three shows that have recently run or are currently running on Broadway that represents this trend. But if we look even closer to home, look at this year's Broadway season, and we can think of the shows not only Tootsie, but also Pretty Woman, which is coming to town in February, Frozen, which will be here in April, and Mean Girls coming in May. You see, each of these are films that became movies or became musicals, movies that became musicals. So this is a big trend, and the Peace Center is right in the thick of it all. And then, of course, after we've mentioned Pretty Woman, Frozen, and Mean Girls, but what brings us all together tonight is Tootsie, the comedy musical that was once a beloved film. And when I say beloved, I mean beloved, but I'm going to get into that a good deal more later. So let's start by talking about Tootsie the film. Here is just a trailer for that film. So those of you who may not have seen it when it premiered in 1982, here is a trailer. And in this trailer, you get a sense of what Tootsie the musical is about, although there are some pretty stark differences, but nevertheless, the germ of the story is very similar. So here you go, 1982, December of 1982, in fact. So almost exactly 40 years ago, about 39 years ago, this film premiered.
Let me tell you about my client, Michael Dorsey. He was a fine actor, maybe a great actor. But for every role he wanted, there was a reason why he wasn't right. Sorry, you're too tall.
I can be shorter.
No, I can't use you. Too short.
Oh, I can be taller. Too moody. Next.
Too old.
Too stubborn.
You're too much trouble.
Too tough. Too temperamental.
Too pushy.
Too difficult. Michael, no one will hire you.
Just watch me.
Boy, did he show us. He auditioned for the female lead on a soap opera and became the hottest new actress in America. And you know what? No one knows his new identity, not even the girl he's madly in love with. Soon everyone will know that she's Dustin Hoffman and he's Tootsie.
All right, so like I said, Tootsie premiered in December of 1982, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about how the movie came to be. Then I'll talk about the reception of the film, which was incredibly well received. Actually remarkably well received. But the idea for the story, if you know anything about the development of film, you know that these things come in fits and starts, just like the development of a Broadway musical. So it was a long and winding road that led to the film of Tootsie being made, that started really as an idea in the mind of a director and actor, Buddy Hackett. So if you know actor Buddy Hackett, he'd starred in a number of things, particularly the Love Bug films and Herbie movies, as well as a number of other things. But he and a director friend of his were working on this idea about a broke talent agent. Remember that, it'll come back up later. In 1975, they started having these conversations about what could we do with this concept of this broke agent. And for whatever reason, they abandoned that idea. But as time went by, other writers and creators and actors came into the conversation, and they borrowed and stole from each other's ideas. And ultimately, it got to Dustin Hoffman. Now, Dustin Hoffman, unbeknownst to Buddy Hackett and his writer friends, had been talking with a playwright himself about a script called Shirley. Dustin Hoffman at this point had already starred in films like The Graduate, Kramer versus Kramer, for which he won an Academy Award, All the President's Men, Marathon Man, a number of films. He was very highly acclaimed as an actor. So he really could do whatever he wanted to do when it came to filmmaking. People, producers, writers, they were all anxious to work with Dustin Hoffman because he was a bankable star. So they brought this idea to Dustin Hoffman, not knowing that he and his playwright friend had been working on a story called Shirley. Now, Shirley was about a male tennis player who pretended to be a female tennis player in order to win more matches. So if that rings similar to the plot line of Tootsie, then that's where kind of that idea came from. So all of these actors and directors and producers get together and they come up with different ideas and they say, here, we were thinking about this and we were thinking about that. And we take the idea with Buddy Hackett and this broke talent agent and Dustin Hoffman thinking about a female impersonator with this male tennis player who impersonates a female tennis player. We see that. And ultimately, they come up with this notion of what eventually becomes the film Tootsie. Now, there were lots and lots of changes, both from a directorial perspective, from the producing perspective. We end up with Sidney Pollack, another famed actor, not only directing the movie, but also performing in it. Remember that broke talent scout that was in the Buddy Hackett film? Well, the talent scout agent in Tootsie was played by none other than Sidney Pollack himself, who was pulling double duty on the film, acting as both actor and director. So it premiered in 1982. As I said, it starred not only Dustin Hoffman and Sidney Pollack, but also Jessica Lange, who was nominated and won an Academy Award for her role, Terry Garr, Dabney Coleman, Bill Murray, and the debut of Gina Davis, who would go on to great things in the film industry, but this was her first film in Tootsie. So it opened in 1982 and was a major hit. Now, like I said, Dustin Hoffman was a bankable star. He had done lots of films already. People followed him. People loved him. They wanted to see everything he was a part of. And Tootsie was certainly no exception to that. And in fact, became the second highest grossing film of the year when it premiered in 1982. The first highest grossing film of the year was E.T., which you may remember. And the third highest grossing film of 1982 was An Officer and a Gentleman. So it had excellent company. It ended up making about $180 million, which was an enormous amount of revenue in 1982. It certainly is even now, but then it was particularly a lot. And I love what legendary reviewer Roger Ebert wrote about it in the Chicago Sun-Times. First of all, he gave it 4 out of 4 stars, which you know does not happen often. Critics are not always so effusive in their praise of films and shows, but for this one he was, and he wrote this, which I love. Tootsie is the kind of movie with a capital M that they used to make in the 1940s when they weren't afraid to mix up absurdity with seriousness, social comment with farce, and a little heartfelt tenderness right in there with the laughs. The movie gets you coming and going. The movie also manages to make some lighthearted but well-aimed observations about sexism. It pokes satirical fun at soap operas, New York show business agents, and the Manhattan social pecking order. Now, a lot of that review, when I read that, I was like, that actually could have been written almost entirely about the musical. So a lot of that same heart and soul of Tootsie the film we will see in the musical too. It does a lot of the same exact things that the film did, according to Roger Ebert's review. But even still, in addition to its incredible success at the box office, it's still heralded as one of the greatest American films of all time, believe it or not. The American Film Institute listed as number 62 on their top 100 greatest films in the American cinema, and it's number 2 on the list of great American comedies. So this film is a must-see if you haven't already. It's a must-see. Now, as you can imagine, now I'm going to skip ahead and it's going to get a little dicey here. There we go. Got it. So as you can imagine, a film with that kind of star power and success behind it obviously producers on Broadway are going to chomp at the bit to get a piece of that action. And in fact, the first time that a Tootsie musical was mentioned, it was reported in the Daily Variety in 2003. So years ago, almost 20 years ago, world-renowned 21-time Tony Award-winning producer and director Harold Prince spoke with with composer Cy Coleman, who wrote Sweet Charity, among other things, many other things, about the potential of doing this, adapting Tootsie, the movie, into a musical. For whatever reason, that collaboration didn't pan out. And eventually in 2009, producer Scott Sanders acquired the rights to the film, and he set about pulling together his own team to create Tootsie in his own way. So one of the first pieces of the puzzle after he had secured the rights was to procure a director, and he formed an alliance with director Scott Ellis, who has a decades-long resume on Broadway and had worked in and around New York for actual decades. And so when Ellis came on board, he set about looking as well for people to tell the story. So he brought on David Yazbek. Now, if you have been around the Peace Center for long, you'll remember the band's visit, which was here not too many seasons ago. I think 2019, if I'm not mistaken, August of 2019, maybe it was August of 2018, but nevertheless, in recent memory, it was here, the Tony Award-winning musical with music and lyrics by David Yazbek. But he's also no stranger to developing movies into musicals. The Full Monty, if you know that show, that was him. Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, that was him. The Band's Visit itself, though it's not a blockbuster film, it nevertheless is based on an Israeli film, an Israeli independent film. And currently, David Yazbek, his post-Tootsie life, is adapting The Princess Bride as a musical for Disney theatricals. So this is kind of his bread and butter, taking film and adapting it to music, or adapting it for the stage. And he set about to find someone that he could write with, that could tell the story, a librettist he needed. And he was interested in working with a man named Robert Horn. Now, Robert Horn had written a musical called 13 for Broadway in 2008. He'd also written a number of other things, lots of films for Disney, like the Teen Beach movie, Sharpay's Fabulous Adventure, a number of films that probably younger audience members may recognize. But he also wrote several episodes of Designing Women, which is a favorite of many of us here in the South, as well as Living Single, another great sitcom that had been very popular. And he wrote several episodes of both of those shows. And before taking on, like I said, doing significant work with Disney in developing their movie offerings and the musicals. He wrote the scripts for their movie musicals. And like I said, he also wrote 13 for Broadway. Just a great writer, known for being really great to work with, but also being really, really, really hilarious, able to pack joke after joke after joke into a show. And that's exactly what this show needed. Obviously, it's the #2 funniest film in American cinema, according to the American Film Institute. Obviously, they needed a great comedic writer. So both, the producer, director, and the composer were all very keen to get Robert Horn on board. He was initially against the idea. He wasn't sure that he could hold muster with that kind of company, but they quickly allayed his fears, and production began in earnest. Now, I found a really fascinating interview with him that I think you will thoroughly enjoy. So I'm going to play that for you. In it, you'll hear him not only talk about his meeting with Yazbek, David Yazbek, but also about some of the way that they approached writing the show and some of the ideas that they tried to bring into the development, which I think are just really fascinating. So I'm going to share that with you now.
I first saw Tootsie when it came out. I had just moved to New York from Los Angeles, and I was working in a movie theater, and it played, and I would watch it over and over and over again. So I saw it many times when it first came out. I just loved the stakes. The stakes were so high. And it asked the question then that I wanted to ask as I approach writing this, which is, if somebody told you you could no longer do the one thing you loved more than anything, How far would you go? What would you do to still be able to do it? The movie itself lives in a world of music. There's a musicality to just the tone and the rhythms of the movie itself. And because it's about the entertainment industry, it was very easy to say, how do we take this and make it sing? When they asked me to do it, my first reaction was, no, I don't want to do this. I met with David Yazbek and we really hit it off. And we knew that if we approached it like a short story and not a movie, and just could do the show that we wanted to do and write it, reinvent it, but not lose the DNA of the piece, it could be okay. It would be all right. The musical itself has a musical within it. It's an updated version of Romeo and Juliet. We realized early on it needed to be funny. It needed to not take up a lot of real estate. And we needed to just have something that we could go to when we needed it that can help tell our actual story, which is he comes in and he makes the show better. And by doing so, unites the cast and the community to celebrate her, which ultimately is a lie. And the betrayal then becomes that much more intense. I decided early on to write my play and then bring back from the movie what might fit into it and not the other way around. I felt that would be the tail wagging the dog. I didn't want to be locked to anything. I just knew that at its core, there was this story that I wanted to stay true to. And then the arteries that it took from there and the form that it would take would be our own. I knew the tone that it needed. That was the first thing that you have to decide. What's the tone of the piece? And we knew we could have a lot of fun with the comedy, that we could ground it in this really emotional and relatable story and place, and therefore have the license to be able to go really big with some of the other characters. Have jokes, have big set pieces and big moments, but also never lose that what's driving this is character, and what's driving this is desperation, what's driving this story. We did a number of things to make it feel much more relevant to the era that we're living in. One of the things is that we took the female characters in the piece and really gave them a strong sense of self and confidence, and they're very much propelling the story. A perfect example is the character of Julie. In the movie, she sort of learns about her life and gets her strength from Michael. I wanted it to be the other way around. I wanted to create a strong character that I understand why he falls in love with her and that he learns from her, and not the reverse. A man putting on a dress in 2019, 2020 does not have the same political and social information that it did in 1982. Also, the culture of women in our society has changed greatly since that time. The idea of feminism and misogyny and how that has evolved and changed all these years. And just the tone and style of the comedy. So those are all the things that I felt like we had to really look at and change. Our version of Tootsie is a love letter both to theater but also to New York. Much of the humor and much of the conversation feels very New York. It has a New York rhythm to it. In New York, if you sit inside your apartment for too long, you feel like FOMO. You are missing out. There's an energy we tried to create in the show that really celebrates New York and has that same pull and that same drive that you have in the city. That feeling of when you write something and you sit in a 1,600 seat theater and you hear uniformly this community of people laughing at something and understanding what you've done and sort of be drawn into it it's a fantastic feeling.
So I think he did a great job of explaining how they did all that they did and the thought behind it. I love something that director Scott Ellis said. He said that as they were developing the show, and you heard this said in another way in what you heard from Robert Horn, but Scott Ellis said that he hoped that within 10 minutes of the opening of the show, people would forget that they were seeing Tootsie, a story that they know, and be so invested with the characters that they had created specifically for the musical that they would just take the ride and see them as really two separate things, right? Maybe the same germ of a story, but told in very different ways, in ways that are appropriate for our day and age, and just a really fun, compelling story that is nevertheless full of really interesting commentary. just as I said, that Roger Ebert review in which he was talking about the social commentary. I think the show is able to achieve that while still being really remarkably hilarious. Now, I want to show you a preview of the Broadway musical. Now, this is using the Broadway company. It's not the same company that's coming through town, but nevertheless, I want you to see, and having just seen the trailer for the film just a few moments ago, I think you'll be able to see there are a lot of similarities, but there's also some pretty stark differences, and they become apparent as you watch the two trailers in pretty close succession. So this is, like I said, the Broadway trailer for Tootsie.
I am a great actor, Stan.
You have one of the worst reputations in this town. No one will hire you.
Something's wrong with Biscuit.
Yes.
Carla, I threw it all away for you.
Yeah. People hate you.
No one hates me.
No one likes you.
Excuse me. Yes, hello. Hi, my name is Dorothy Michaels.
1, 2, watch me. Fussy arm. Julie Taymor. This is textbook Broadway, people.
Don't you find being a woman right now complicated?
Right now, extremely. Yeah.
I won't let you down because you believed in me. And now anybody can see I'm really alive. I won't let you
Now, something else I want to say, again, harkening back to that Ebert review, he talked about it, reminded him of a movie from the 1940s. And I have to be honest with you, I am reminded a lot, I'm going to skip ahead here and then I'll come back to that in just a moment. But I'm reminded a lot of the musicals of the 1940s, which is one reason why that review stuck out to me so much, because as you'll hear in my conversation in just a moment with the with one of the company members that'll be here in Greenville. There are a lot of ways, even though this is a brand new musical, there are a lot of ways in which it harkens back to a golden age musical. You'll hear an overture, an intra-act music as well between the two acts. The way that just the escapist nature of the piece, just so much fun, and yet at the same time having a very sweet and well-told story. It really harkens back to a different kind of theater making, again, even though it's a brand new show. So I think that Roger Ebert, even though he wrote that review in 1982, it still applies 39 years later to this musical. Now, the musical premiered on Broadway in April of 2019. It played the Marquis Theater, which is, if you spent much time in Times Square, it's hard to miss the Marquis. It's a big one in the Marriott Hotel there in Times Square, and played until January of 2020 when it closed. It was nominated for several Tony Awards and won a couple as well. Robert Horn, who you heard interviewed, won the Tony Award for Best Book of a Musical, and Santino Fontana, who played Tootsie, or the title character, Michael Dorsey and Dorothy Michaels. He won a Tony Award for his role as well. Now, about the title, Tootsie. There's a number of different things said about where the title came from. Probably the most generally held is that the title of Tootsie came from Dustin Hoffman's mother. She died of a stroke while they were recording the film or shooting the film. And so he was inspired largely, his portrayal of Tootsie was largely inspired by his mother. And Tootsie is a name that she would often refer to people as. And it's said that that's why the film is called Tootsie. Now, again, I'm sure others may have different ideas, but that seems to be the most widely accepted one to explain the title. So I was fortunate enough a few weeks ago, back about a week or so before Christmas, to speak with a member of the company. He plays Max Van Horn, and I'm very excited for you to hear what he has to say about his experience being part of this company. So without further ado, here is Lukas Miller. if I can, sorry. I jumped ahead and I messed up my PowerPoint. Just one moment.
Well, I want
There it
to
is.
welcome a cast member, Lukas James Miller, who's part of the Tootsie cast, who's going to be traveling through Greenville here in just a week or so. Lukas, thank you for joining us. I want you to introduce yourself. I want you to tell us a little bit about the role that you play in this show and maybe some favorite roles you've played in the past.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. I'm Lukas James Miller. I'm a New York City-based actor. Luckily, just got home for the holidays for a little bit, just settling back into my home, setting up some Christmas decorations and such. I'm on the national tour of Tootsie, of course, of why I'm here today. I played the role of Max Van Horn, who is a lovable Labrador retriever of a reality star, who throughout the course of the show ends up being stunt casted as the lead role in a musical continuation of Romeo and Juliet that is set for Broadway. And I find myself starring alongside a Dorothy Michaels, which is the actor of Michael Dorsey that is portraying the role of Dorothy Michaels. And a little bit of a love interest may flourish in our time in rehearsal and throughout the show as Dorothy teaches Max a little bit on how to act because he's not very good at it. Yeah, some like past roles and stuff. This is the second time that I've been on tour before. I also did the national tour of Cinderella, the revival that I believe started on Broadway back in 2013. And I played the role of Prince Joffer in that production. Yeah, that's probably been one of my favorite past roles. I do have a streak of playing princes in shows. I've actually played that role in Cinderella twice, and I've also played Prince Eric in Little Mermaid 2 times. Most recently, that was the first show that I did back from the pandemic, which is a super fun thing. I actually got to dip my toes in a little bit and strut the board some before starting Tootsie rehearsals. And that was a lovely experience and a lovely role to start things off. But now we're back in full swing of things and touring around the country, playing to big sold out houses every night. It's really nice.
Yeah, so tell me, I heard you say that you played Prince Topher in the tour of Cinderella. Were you by any chance with the tour when it came through Greenville in 2015? You look like you were probably too young at that point, but I thought I'd ask just in case.
Unfortunately, no. I was on a later leg of the tour, so I did not get to come through Greenville. I can't recall. I know we played some, I forget what theater it was. We did play at least one theater in South Carolina, though, or it might have been North Carolina, because my parents after I went to college and stuff, my parents moved down to South Carolina.
Okay.
And so I know that they came and saw the show then, but I can't recall what theater it was. But
what
no,
part of South Carolina are they in?
They're in North Myrtle Beach.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
I was getting to visit there.
Yes, it is a nice place to go and visit, to get out of the cold for a little bit. And I won't be going down there for the holidays this season, unfortunately, but I'm glad to be home in New York. But I have spent a few Christmases down there, and it's a very nice place to. We set up our little Christmas tree on the beach and have mimosas and stuff on Christmas morning. It's a nice
It's a very different vibe than the Christmas tree at Rockefeller Center, you know?
Yeah.
Well, you know, you mentioned when talking about the role that you play in Tootsie that it's a reality TV star. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Anybody who knows the source material for Tootsie will realize that maybe that doesn't quite fit into that 1982 film starring Dustin Hoffman. So we've already talked earlier in the Peace Talk about where this film came from and how it was the second highest grossing film of 1982, only behind E.T. So it was a big smash hit. So it makes sense that it would be retooled for Broadway. But I heard Robert Horn, the librettist of the show, one of the co-creators, say, you know, when you're approaching a source material, something that you're adapting from one medium for another, you don't want to redo it just as it's been done because it's already been done. So I wonder if you can tell me maybe some of the ways that he redid Tootsie, and then maybe tell us how he stayed true to the film. What are some of the ways that they're similar and some of the ways that they're different?
Absolutely. I believe that Robert is just a genius to begin with, and one of the funniest people I've ever met in my life. The man knows how to add 70 jokes into one scene, and somehow it's all pulled off flawlessly, and all of those get a really good laugh. I will say that I personally have not watched the movie as the source material, and I kind of want to stay away from it just because of what we are doing is quite different. Though from what I've been told about the film and from what I understand, anybody who really enjoyed the film is going to still get all of the same kicks that they would be looking for in the film, but on almost new story in a way, because I recognize that in the film, the actor that plays Dorothy Michaels gets cast in a soap opera, I believe.
Right.
For ours, this show really is a love letter to the theater, and not in an alienating way, but anybody who is a part of the theater community, certainly anybody that is watching this Peace Talk right now, is really gonna get some really not necessarily niche jokes, but it is truly all set for the theater world, because they're getting cast in a Broadway show. So it is all the crux of the story all revolves around this production of a new Broadway musical as opposed to a soap opera. And from what I understand, there are also quite a few new characters, quite a few takes on characters that are completely flipped on their head. For instance, I know that my character is somewhat based on a character that was in the film, although it is entirely different. Going from, I think, another soap opera star as opposed to a reality star who is stunt casted as a role in a Broadway show just to sell some tickets. But he finds his footing. Yeah, overall, I mean, that's the biggest takeaway. The basic plot points, from what I understand, are very similar. We do have this desperate out of work actor in Michael Dorsey, who creates a persona in order to get a job, and then ends up getting in way over his head, and subsequently hilarity ensues. All of those same key points are going to be there in the musical, but we are also going to get a new Broadway centered kind of story.
Yeah, and that's from the opening number, even, that opening number is really a love letter to New York. Even it's meta theatrical, right?
Yeah, it is.
In a show, but they're singing how much they love New York, right? So, well, you mentioned that even though a lot of the bells and whistles around the story have changed, the characters have been updated. I believe it's shifted its setting from Los Angeles to New York City. But the nuts and bolts of this very frustrated and very frustrating actor who decides that a way for him to find success is to take on this persona, as you described it. What do you think about that kind of core story is worth telling? We're almost 40 years removed from the film, which is really hard to believe. But what do you think makes that kind of a timeless sort of story that's worth telling again?
I think it's almost a very Shakespearean kind of deception that we're working with. So it's a plot point that I think translates across lots of time. But what I think is really nice about this production and how it differs from the film is how, even just from the Broadway production to our touring production, things have been retooled to make sure that we're not making any jokes that may be a bit antiquated or a bit off color or offensive to anyone. Being that it is a story that is almost through a feminist lens, I would say, because we have this desperate, egotistical man who puts himself in the position of and wears a woman's shoes, and then sees what he has to deal with when he is living life as a woman. Aside from all the deceptions that he makes and the mistakes that he makes along the way, he does get more of an appreciation, especially within the theater community, about how women are treated and how much more he has to do. And I really like how that has been an open conversation, especially with, you mentioned Robert Horn. Robert Horn was with us all throughout rehearsals for the tour and things. So it's been nice, because it's almost as if we have a slightly revamped, retooled production just from Broadway, as opposed to something just being like slapped on wheels and sent out into the world. And it's really nice to see how much care and thought has been put into that. So I think it's a lovely work that we've managed to keep of the present time without falling into any pitfalls, but still delivering that same comedic humor that you would expect from the film that you may cherish.
You know, it's funny. I'm glad that you mentioned Shakespeare, because there are definitely elements of farce and in this show. And almost there's a scene or two or three that feels almost like a noises off kind of farce, where, you know, you feel like timing has to be so specific and so exact to pull off some of those scenes. It is uproariously hilarious. Yeah. But I will tell you, my Peace Center audience, 9 years strong now, I know that one of their favorite things to hear from actors that we've talked to is about backstage bloopers. So for a show that relies so heavily on dramatic irony and even some farce, have there been any moments when, the other shoe has dropped, or any bloopers you can share with us? Because we love to hear them.
I would say there are lots of moments that would seem primed for a large blooper. I mean, find some wood to knock on. We have not had any severe ones take place as of yet. We've only been out on the road for about 3 months, though, so there's time to
give it time. That's right. Give it time.
But when you mentioned specifically very farcical moments, luckily I'm not so much a part of some of them, but there are some scenes that are just very high stakes prop comedy in which our actors, Drew Becker, who plays Michael Dorsey, who is the actor who portrays the persona of Dorothy Michaels, and his roommate, Jeff Slater, played by David Michael Grant. They do quite a bit of some farcical scene work with throwing wigs and purses and things all across their apartment because there's a knock at the door, and Michael is in his Dorothy attire and needs to get out of it in an instant. And I am so glad that I don't have to know how they do it, but it is very fun to watch. And watching it throughout tech and things it's just incredible to see how, I mean, some of these guys, some of the tosses that they make, it looks like they should be the NFL Combine. It's incredible.
No doubt about it. You know, it's funny because a couple of seasons ago we had the play that goes wrong, or the show that goes. It's the play that goes wrong, right? That goes wrong, yeah. Which is just hilarious. And so our Peace Talk audience will remember. Many of them will remember that farce, that movement, and how reliant it is on physical comedy, and that's in Tootsie in spades. So. If you're looking for that, you will find it in this show. You know, and that brings me to another question. This show, I saw it in summer of 2019 on Broadway. And I don't know if I've laughed that hard in the theater in a really, it is legitimately hilarious from curtain up to curtain down. And I wonder, you know, is now a great time for that kind of a show where we just laugh, we forget what's happening outside of the theater, we just laugh and enjoy comedy. Do you find that in this show?
Oh, absolutely. That was one of the best things about this being kind of a return to the theater, if I may. It's been super enjoyable just to go into a new place, especially like the first shows that we do usually on a Tuesday in a new city. A lot of folks that have been coming out, this is the first thing that they've seen since the pandemic. And I wish I could, I believe you said this earlier, talking about like bottling the energy or the laughter, just to hear all of that laughter and enjoyment coming out of such a long period where we've been away is just one of the most rewarding things. I look forward to it every night. I can't wait to have some in Greenville. I can't wait to share some laughter with everyone. And it really is amazing kind of how many jokes can be packed into one scene, that it's almost, I've never had to hold for laughter so much for anything before.
I believe.
Without giving anything away, there is one scene that I am a large part in which I reveal a truth of some sort. that results in quite a farcical humor between myself and Michael Dorsey and Jeff Slater, his roommate, that is so well set up that there's been times where we have timed the laughter break that we have, and we've gone over like a full minute. And it's just kind of like exchanging glances and an understanding of what's going on that you don't even need to say anything. And it's an incredible feeling to just know that we're going along on that ride with the audience, and to hear that response is just so lovely.
And it's something that we all need. You know, there's so many ways that even though this is a new show, it premiered on Broadway in 2019, won the Tony Award for Best Book of a Musical. Santino Fontana, who played the role of Michael Dorsey, Dorothy Michaels on Broadway, won a Tony Award for his portrayal. Also, another connection for you, right?
Yeah.
He was Coach Topher on Broadway.
He was.
Correct? So there's another connection for you two. But it links in so many ways to old school musical theater. And by that, I mean, not only is it very escapist, it's just fun. And it's like I said, uproariously hilarious, but also there's even the structure of an old musical. There's an overture, you know, I mean, we're kind of getting back to days of old. So it's really beautiful as a historian to look and see those things, you know, being reinvigorated in new musicals.
I would say, especially going off of talking about like having an overture, and we have, our band is absolutely incredible. But something I didn't even realize until we were a couple weeks into performances, because I hadn't like sat down and looked at the entr'acte music because I don't play in the band. But there's even a moment that it's like it is legitimately like a jazz number where we go from section to section with like some improvisation, and it's unbelievable some of the things that these musicians can pull off. It's so nice to hear, and it's just, when have you seen that before in the entr'acte of a Broadway musical where there's actually a true jazz section? It's so enjoyable. Yeah. And you'll see even
sorry to interrupt. No, I was going to say, you travel with the full band?
We do, yes.
Okay.
I'm not sure off the top of my head how many pieces, but it's pretty full, and the sound that they make is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, well, and there's some great music. David Yazbek's music. Peace Center audiences will recognize him most recently from The Band's Visit. He did the music for that show, which was another Tony Award winner. So there's a lot of firepower coming at us in this show when Tootsie comes into town. I want to ask you one more thing. So we've talked about how hilarious the show is. We've talked about how much fun it is to see it and how I cannot wait for Greenville audiences to enjoy it. But what do you think, in spite of all the hilarity, what do you think is at the core, the story, the takeaway for this? Is it all just let's have fun, which is a completely valid reason to do a piece of theater, or is there a deeper message? What do you think? And if so, what do you think that is?
I believe there certainly is a deeper message at the core of it. Like I said before, it is kind of a story that is, I like to view through a feminist lens, at least, because we do see the character of Michael Dorsey learning a lot along the way, even though he is going so far out of his depths into this world that he doesn't understand, and making many mistakes and hurting folks along the way. But at the end of the day, he does have some realizations about what it was like to step in the shoes of a woman for a little bit, and experience what life is like in that regard. And I also am a personal fan of how it is more or less resolved or not resolved. It is interesting. It's something that I think is handled beautifully between our two leads, with Drew Brecker as Michael Dorsey, and Ashley Alexandra as Julie Nichols. Her performance, especially in that regard, in how she deals with this truth coming out, and it's something that I don't want to give anything away necessarily, but it's very touching and a heartfelt finish, in which we do realize that this character, who is a very, very flawed hero from the outset, we do realize that he has learned a little bit along the way, and there are direct takeaways from that are outlined in the script, which I think is really nice. But that's also not taken away from the good time that we're having and the jokes upon jokes upon jokes. It is something that kind of just like creeps its way in, and it leaves you thinking a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. Well, Lukas, we're going to look for you in your role as Max Van Horn, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
We'll look for you.
You won't be able to miss him.
Well, we can't wait to have you in town. We thank you so much for visiting with us today. And we hope you have a very, well, I guess by the time that we're using this video, it'll be post-Christmas. So I hope you have a very happy new year.
Thank you. Thank you. You as well. Happy holidays, everyone.
All right, so I thoroughly enjoyed my conversation with Lukas, and I think you got to hear reiterated some of the things that I talked about earlier in the Peace Talk. Just again, want to reiterate, this is a fun show with a great story to tell. It's a wonderful show for bringing us out of kind of the dark of this pandemic that is ongoing. It's just a nice little reprieve from some of the heaviness that surrounds us day in and day out. So I have a few moments remaining, and I'd be happy to take any questions that you might have about the musical itself, or if you need anything clarified from other points of conversation. Let's see here if I can find I don't see any questions, but I'll give you just a minute to leave any questions in the chat. And if you think of anything, otherwise, I am so hopeful that you'll take advantage of this show being in town. It is a dandy of a show. It's thoroughly enjoyable. And I look forward to it being in town and hope that you will take advantage of it coming through town and enjoy and laugh and sing. And we'll hopefully see you at our next Peace Talk coming up not too far in the distant future. Thanks so much and have a very happy new year.